In the small village of Amoke, where the sun kissed the earth with warmth every morning, there lived a girl named Ifeoma. But Ifeoma was no ordinary girl. From the day she was born, her face was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Her beauty was so powerful, so overwhelming, that it was said to be both a blessing and a curse. It all began on the day she cried her first cry in the village's clinic. Every nurse, every visitor, even the local midwife, gasped in awe when they saw her tiny face. "She's beautiful," they whispered, their voices trembling. But then, something strange happened. People who stared at her for too long began to feel faint. One nurse dropped her clipboard. The midwife clutched her chest, and before long, they all fell one after the other, lifeless. The news of the tragedy spread like wildfire, and from that day on, Ifeoma was no longer seen as a miracle. She was feared. Her parents, heartbroken but determined to protect her, wrapped her face with layers of Ankara cloth before stepping out of their home. "We must protect her," her father said, his voice heavy with sorrow, "and we must protect the world from her." But how long can someone live behind a mask? What happens when the world decides to challenge what they don't understand? This is the story of Ifeoma, the girl who hid her face, and the day everything changed.
Subscribe to my channel.
From the moment Ifeoma could talk, she had questions. "Mama, why do I have to wear this cloth on my face?" she asked one evening while her mother stirred a pot of steaming jollof rice. Her voice was soft, almost trembling. Her mother paused, turning to look at her daughter. "Nay, it's to keep you safe," she said gently, wiping her hands on her wrapper. "But safe from what?" Ifeoma insisted, her little hands fidgeting with the edges of the cloth that had become part of her identity. Her mother sighed deeply, crouching to Ifeoma's level. "There is something special about you, my child. Your beauty is powerful. It can harm people who aren't prepared for it." Ifeoma frowned. "So it's my fault?" "No, my dear," her mother said quickly, pulling her into a hug. "It's not your fault. It's a gift, but one that we must protect carefully. Do you understand?" Ifeoma nodded slowly, but the weight of her mother's words settled heavily in her heart. A life behind walls. As she grew older, Ifeoma learned to accept her life indoors. Her parents chose to homeschool her, teaching her everything they knew. Ifeoma was bright, brighter than most children her age. She could solve math problems faster than her father could read them out loud. She devoured books on science, history, and even stories about faraway lands. But no matter how much she learned, one thing remained missing: friends. One day, while staring out the window at the village children playing Ayo under the mango tree, she whispered to herself, "Why can't I be out there too? Why can't I just be normal?" Her father, who had been watching silently from the corner, approached her. "Ifeoma," he said softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You are not like them, but that doesn't mean you are less. One day, the world will see you for who you are inside, not just what you look like." His words were kind, but they didn't fill the void in her heart. She wanted to laugh with other children, share secrets, and climb trees like the boys who shouted her name in playful songs they made up, teasing the invisible girl.
Subscribe to my channel.
When Ifeoma turned 18, her parents made a decision that would change everything. "It's time for you to go to university," her mother announced during dinner. Ifeoma's fork froze midair. "University?" Her father nodded. "We can't keep you hidden forever. You need to experience the world, and the world needs to experience you." "But what about my face?" she asked, touching the cloth that had never left her skin. Her mother reached out, holding her hand. "We'll find a way. You'll wear your cloth, and you'll promise to never remove it. No one must see your face, Ifeoma. No one." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she nodded. "I promise." The university was bustling with life. Students ran across the campus, carrying books and chatting excitedly about lectures and assignments. Ifeoma, however, walked with her head low, the colorful cloth wrapped tightly around her face, leaving only her bright, curious eyes visible. Her presence didn't go unnoticed. Whispers followed her wherever she went. "Why is she covering her face?" one student asked. "Maybe she's hiding something," another whispered. Despite the stares and murmurs, Ifeoma focused on her studies. She aced every test, handed in her assignments early, and quickly gained the respect of her professors. But respect didn't equal friendship. She ate alone in the cafeteria, sat in the corner of the lecture hall, and avoided the curious gazes of her classmates. Among her peers was Adaobi, the queen of the school. Adaobi was everything Ifeoma wasn't: bold, loud, and always the center of attention. She was used to being admired and envied, and she didn't like how Ifeoma ignored her. One day, while Ifeoma was sitting under a tree reading a novel, Adaobi approached her with her entourage of friends. "Excuse me, Madam Mystery," Adaobi said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Why are you always covering your face? Are you hiding something?" Ifeoma glanced up briefly, then returned to her book. "It's none of your business." Adaobi's friends gasped, and Adaobi's face darkened. "None of my business? This is a university, not your father's house. If you want to act like you're better than everyone else, go back home." Ifeoma closed her book slowly and stood up, her eyes meeting Adaobi's. "I'm not trying to be better than anyone," she said calmly. "But trust me, you don't want to see what's under this cloth." Adaobi smirked. "Oh, really? What's the worst that could happen? Are you so ugly that you can't even show your face?" The crowd around them laughed, but Ifeoma remained calm. "Laugh all you want," she said quietly. "But don't say I didn't warn you." Adaobi stepped closer, her voice low but sharp. "One day, I'll find out your secret, and when I do, everyone will see that you're nothing special." Ifeoma didn't respond. She simply walked away, leaving Adaobi fuming behind her.
Subscribe to my channel.
The days at university continued, and Ifeoma tried her best to remain invisible, but Adaobi wasn't one to let things go. Her curiosity and jealousy grew stronger with every passing day. One afternoon, Adaobi gathered her friends under the mango tree on campus. "We're going to find out what's under that cloth," she announced, her voice filled with determination. "How will you do that?" asked one of her friends, Azin, who was always eager to follow Adaobi's schemes. Adaobi smirked. "Easy. We'll get someone close to her, someone she'll trust. Once we have her trust, we'll make her take it off." The perfect candidate for Adaobi's plan was Chijioke, one of the most charming boys in school. With his smooth words and confident smile, he was used to getting what he wanted. Adaobi approached him during lunch, her voice sweet as honey. "Chijioke," she purred, leaning against the table where he sat with his friends. "I need your help with something." Chijioke raised an eyebrow. "What now, Adaobi? Another one of your games?" "This one is different," Adaobi said, lowering her voice. "It's about Ifeoma, the girl who always hides her face." Chijioke glanced across the cafeteria where Ifeoma sat alone reading as usual. "What about her?" "I want to know why she covers her face," Adaobi said, her eyes narrowing. "I need you to get close to her, make her trust you, then find out what she's hiding." Chijioke laughed, shaking his head. "Why are you so interested in her? She's not bothering anyone." Adaobi's expression darkened. "She thinks she's better than everyone else. I just want to put her in her place." Chijioke hesitated. He didn't like Adaobi's games, but the promise of a reward made him reconsider. "Fine," he said with a shrug, "but you owe me for this." The next day, Chijioke approached Ifeoma in the library. He sat down across from her and gave her a warm smile. "Hi, Ifeoma, right?" Ifeoma looked up from her book, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Yes. Can I help you?" Chijioke chuckled. "No, I just thought I'd introduce myself. I'm Chijioke. I've noticed you around, and I thought maybe we could be friends." Ifeoma blinked, surprised. "Friends? Why would you want to be friends with me?" "Why not?" Chijioke replied, leaning back in his chair. "You're smart, quiet, and you don't follow the crowd. I like that." Ifeoma hesitated. She had spent so long keeping her distance from everyone that the idea of having a friend felt strange. But Chijioke's smile seemed genuine, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of hope. "All right," she said cautiously. "We can be friends." Over the next few weeks, Chijioke stayed close to Ifeoma. He walked her to class, shared his lunch with her, and even helped her carry her books. Slowly, Ifeoma began to trust him. She found herself laughing at his jokes and opening up about her favorite books and dreams for the future. One evening, as they sat under the mango tree, Ifeoma asked, "Why are you so nice to me, Chijioke? Most people avoid me." Chijioke smiled, looking up at the sky. "Because I see something special in you, Ifeoma. You're different, and that's not a bad thing." Ifeoma's heart warmed at his words, but deep down, a voice whispered, "Be careful. Don't let your guard down." One day, while studying in Ifeoma's dorm room, Chijioke decided to put Adaobi's plan into action. As Ifeoma stepped into the kitchen to make tea, Chijioke slipped a small powder into her cup, the sleeping powder Adaobi had given him. When Ifeoma returned with the tea, she handed Chijioke a cup and took a sip of her own. They talked for a while, but soon her eyes grew heavy. "I think I'm getting sleepy," she murmured, stifling a yawn. "Maybe you should lie down," Chijioke suggested, feigning concern. Ifeoma nodded, her head drooping as she made her way to the bed. Within minutes, she was fast asleep. Chijioke's hands trembled as he approached her. "It's just a cloth," he whispered to himself. "What's the worst that could happen?" He reached out, carefully untying the knots. As the cloth fell away, he froze. Ifeoma's face was revealed, and it was unlike anything he had ever seen. Her beauty was unearthly, radiant, and overwhelming. For a moment, he couldn't look away. Then it hit him. A wave of darkness surged through his chest, his vision blurred, and his legs gave out beneath him. With a final gasp, Chijioke collapsed to the floor. Ifeoma woke up a few minutes later, her head spinning. She noticed the cloth on the floor and her heart stopped. "No, no, no, no," she cried, scrambling to tie it back over her face. Then she saw him, Chijioke lying motionless on the floor. "Chijioke!" she whispered, crawling toward him. She shook his shoulder, but he didn't move. Tears streamed down her face as she realized what had happened. "Why did you do this? I warned everyone, but no one listens." Her cries drew the attention of other students. When they found Chijioke's lifeless body, the dorm erupted in chaos. The chaos in the dormitory was unlike anything Ifeoma had ever experienced. Students gathered in groups, whispering and pointing at her room. Security personnel arrived, their stern faces masking confusion and suspicion. Ifeoma sat on the floor, her face buried in her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. She didn't resist as they questioned her. "What happened here?" one officer asked, his voice firm but calm. Ifeoma looked up, her voice trembling. "He saw my face. That's all it takes. I warned him. I warned everyone, but he didn't listen." The officer frowned, exchanging glances with his partner. "What are you talking about? How can someone die just by looking at your face?" "I don't know how it works," Ifeoma said, her voice cracking. "It's been like this since I was born. My face, it's cursed." As word of the incident spread across campus, rumors ran wild. "She's a witch," one student whispered. "No, she's some kind of spirit," another replied. The university authorities called in Ifeoma's parents. When they arrived, her mother hugged her tightly while her father spoke to the administrators. "We've tried to protect her from this," he explained. "It's not something she can control. Her beauty, it's dangerous." The administrators, skeptical but cautious, decided not to expel Ifeoma. "She's not responsible for this," one of them said quietly, "but we need to keep an eye on her." Adaobi, hearing of Chijioke's fate, was overcome with a mix of fear and guilt. She hadn't meant for him to get hurt, she only wanted to humiliate Ifeoma. But now, the consequences of her actions weighed heavily on her. She stormed into Ifeoma's dorm room one evening, her usual confidence replaced by anger and desperation. "This is your fault," Adaobi shouted, pointing a trembling finger at Ifeoma. "If you weren't hiding behind that stupid cloth, none of this would have happened." Ifeoma stood, her eyes calm but piercing. You think this is my fault? You're the one who sent Chijioke to spy on me. You're the one who pushed him to do something dangerous. This is on you, Adaobi. Adaobi flinched at the words, but she wasn't ready to back down. You should leave this school, she hissed. You don't belong here. Ifeoma stepped closer, her voice steady. I belong here just as much as anyone else. I'm not going to run away because of you or anyone else. Adaobi clenched her fists, but the fear in her eyes was unmistakable. Without another word, she turned and left, leaving Ifeoma standing tall and resolute. Amid the tension and whispers, one person stood by Ifeoma, Dennis, a quiet and kind-hearted student who had always admired her intelligence and determination. Unlike the others, he wasn't afraid of her. He approached her one afternoon as she sat under the mango tree. Ifeoma, he said softly, sitting beside her. She glanced at him, her eyes filled with sadness. What do you want, Dennis? Haven't you heard enough stories about me? Dennis smiled gently. I don't care about the stories. I care about the person sitting in front of me. You've been through so much, and yet you keep going. That takes strength. Ifeoma blinked, surprised by his words. You're not afraid of me? No, Dennis replied firmly. And I don't think you should be afraid of yourself either. As graduation approached, Ifeoma faced a difficult decision. Should she continue hiding, or should she finally reveal her true self? The fear of hurting others still lingered, but so did the desire to live freely. One evening, she sat with her parents, sharing her thoughts. I don't want to hide anymore, she said, her voice steady but emotional. I want to walk across that stage on graduation day without this cloth. I want to be seen. Her father hesitated, but her mother took her hand. Ifeoma, you've spent your whole life running from this. If you're ready to face the world, we'll stand by you. Tears filled Ifeoma's eyes as she nodded. Thank you. The day of graduation arrived. The campus was alive with excitement. Students in gowns and caps, families cheering, and photographers capturing every moment. Ifeoma stood in her room, staring at herself in the mirror. The colorful cloth still covered her face, but today it felt heavier than ever. Dennis knocked softly on her door. Ifeoma, are you ready? She opened the door, her eyes meeting his. Dennis, I'm scared. You don't have to be, he said, his voice reassuring. You've worked so hard for this moment. Don't let fear take it away from you. Ifeoma took a deep breath and nodded. Okay, I'm ready. As the ceremony began, students filed onto the stage one by one to receive their certificates. When Ifeoma's name was called, the crowd murmured in anticipation. That's the girl who always covers her face, someone whispered. She's finally going to show us, another added. Clap again. Ifeoma walked to the stage, her steps slow but steady. The whispers grew louder, but she blocked them out, focusing on the moment. When she reached the center of the stage, she paused. She turned to face the crowd, her hands trembling as they reached for the edges of the cloth. With one swift motion, she pulled it away. The auditorium fell silent. Gasps echoed through the hall as everyone stared at Ifeoma's face. It was radiant, otherworldly, and overwhelming. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then, a young girl in the front row fainted. Others began to feel dizzy, clutching their heads or closing their eyes to avoid the intensity of her beauty. But Dennis stood firm, his gaze steady. He walked onto the stage, standing beside her. Ifeoma, he said, his voice calm and clear. You don't have to face this alone. He held her hand, and to everyone's shock, nothing happened to him. The prophet's words from years ago echoed in Ifeoma's mind. The curse will only break when someone truly loves you for who you are. Tears streamed down her face as she looked at Dennis. It's you, she whispered. Dennis smiled. It's always been you, Ifeoma. Suddenly, a wave of warmth spread through her body. The overwhelming aura that had always surrounded her began to fade. The dizziness in the crowd subsided, and the fainted girl was helped back to her feet. The curse was gone. The crowd erupted into cheers, clapping and celebrating, not just the graduation, but the incredible moment they had just witnessed. Adaobi, standing at the back of the hall, watched in silence. For the first time, She felt a pang of regret, not just for what she had done, but for how much she had let jealousy control her. As the ceremony ended, Ifeoma walked through the crowd, her face uncovered and her head held high. People smiled at her, some apologizing for their past judgments, and others simply in awe of her courage. The moral later that evening, Ifeoma stood under the mango tree with Dennis, the stars twinkling above them. "I never thought this day would come," she said softly. Dennis smiled, taking her hand. "You've always had the strength, Ifeoma. You just needed to believe it." From that day forward, Ifeoma lived her life freely, no longer hiding behind a cloth. She learned that true beauty isn't just in appearances, it's in courage, kindness, and the love we give and receive. And so, the girl who once hid her face became an inspiration to everyone she met. Dear listeners, the lesson here is simple. Never judge someone based on what you don't understand. True strength lies in embracing who you are and facing the world with courage. What did you learn from Ifeoma's story? Share your thoughts with us. We'd love to hear from you.